And the other is that politically, you may be at the start of a transition from what has basically been a short-termist rent-seeking politics to a mature politics, a politics which is concerned about building the society and is conscious of the future and is conscious of its responsibilities. So potentially a profound economic transition, basically from an oil economy to a producing economy, coincident with a profound political shift from a rent-seeking, short-termist, grab it whilst you can politics to a build the society politics, a mature politics. And I'm going to take those in turn. That's basically going to be my key. So I want to start with what will it mean to be in that transition from an oil economy to a post-oil economy. And let me start out, first of all, why I think we're going to have to make that transition. And that is that basically, the fall in oil revenues is here to stay. If we look at the future of carbon energy, it doesn't look very good. A lot of carbon energy has been discovered around the world in the last 10 years of high prices. A huge amount has been discovered, and there's been this massive technological shift towards shale, which Nigeria hasn't gone, but a lot of other places have. So the world is becoming awash with carbon-based energy. It's actually got far more carbon-based energy than it can safely burn. So sometime over the next 30 years, we're going to go through the agonizing global process of realizing that a lot of the carbon energy we've already discovered cannot be burned. The implication of that, as it sinks in, will be that these are what's called stranded assets. In other words, they're pretty useless. And as the consciousness of stranded assets kicks in, a perverse effect kicks in, which is if your assets, you start to worry they might become stranded, what do? You get them out of the ground now. And if you all try and get your carbon assets out of the ground now, just think what happens to their price. So that, I think, is basically the future scenario for carbon-based energy. What's more, over the decade of the super cycle, you were one of the few economies that didn't actually benefit from a big wave of investment in new extraction, in new discovery, new extraction. Other things were going on in the Delta. We've got the oil bill jammed up in the Congress. There was just too much uncertainty. And so during the good times, the energy companies just didn't invest in a lot of new discovery and extraction. And now it's over. The super cycle is over. The Financial Times, as I read as I flew in, had just announced Shell has decided yesterday not to develop not to make a big investment in deep water oil in Nigeria. So that's the starting point. That big oil is over. That will imply a big repositioning of the economy, and that is still to come. The last few months, we haven't really been adjusting very much yet, because we've basically been spending down. Understandably, with an election there, let's try and postpone the shock. But the shock's here. And it's going to hit two sectors. I mean, it's not all about news business. The biggest sector that gets hit is government. Because, amazingly, most of government revenue is oil. If we look a couple of years ago, something over 60% of government revenue was oil. And that's now really being squeezed. Right? So the government sector has a big shock. It's basically going to have to cut its spending and raise taxes. The government will be coping with its own shock. It's shock to its own system. Then the other sector, which is very, very hard hit, is the trade sector, international trade sector. Virtually all your exports are oil. And that means that as your oil revenues have gone down, your oil exports have gone down, your imports are going to go down. Pretty well dollar to dollar. Those two adjustments, with the government taking a big hit and the international trade sector taking a wire on foot, 6%. Right? So a lot of people and a lot of jobs, but very poor matching of people to jobs. So that's the triple miracle that an efficient city achieves. But it has to be built. Lagos is on the way to doing that. But you're not there yet. No, very obviously. That's the job you have to do. That, once you're getting to livable density, an effective, productive city, that ignites, in turn, three other great processes. One is a virtuous circle in which land values go up. And because land values go up, you can tax them. The sort of thing that we were just hearing about that Lagos has started to manage to do. Right? You tax that appreciation in land values, and that finances the infrastructure. The country that is excelled at that is China. China has actually achieved this triple miracle of urbanization, largely thanks to being able to afford to do infrastructure in advance of settlement, because as the city grew, the city councils could sell off the appreciated land. So you've got a virtuous circle of finance and infrastructure. Second, you do what China's done, what monopolists just achieved. You break into global markets, whether for manufacturing or whether for services. And before you break into global markets, you break into regional markets. Lagos needs to be envisaged as the economic capital of West Africa, serving the entire region, not just the country. And it's commendable that your banks have already woken up to that, but a lot more needs to follow. And finally, so you get the virtuous circle of tax and infrastructure, you get the enormous potential of breaking in so that the world and the region becomes your market, not just the country. And finally, that ignites jobs growth. Because you get into the virtuous circle that China and indeed the whole East Asia got into, that as you expand, you reach more and more scale economies, your costs fall, and so you can expand even more. That's what you get by looking outward. Now, as you start to suck in job opportunities, China is running out of workers. That's why its wages have risen up dramatically. That's why China is already offshoring industry. It's out of the game for the labour-intensive industry. And the reason China is in really quite serious trouble here is that it's running out of young people. That one-child policy is now going to bring a lot of grief. It's not your problem, is it? What you've got is one of the youngest populations on Earth, and that is potentially very good news. Because young people, I hate to say this, young people are more innovative than older. What comes naturally to young people is change. And that means that if you're in a society with a lot of young people, as Nigeria is, the last thing you want to do is try and keep on doing the same damn thing. As an aside, I don't want to be provocative, as an aside, you've been doing agriculture since time immemorial, right? Where the big opportunities are the new activities in cities. The new service activities that didn't exist 20 years ago. Who teaches me how to use my iPhone? Right? My 8-year-old. And so, harnessing the potential of your youth happens in cities. And that, as chief executives, is one of your core jobs. And so, what I now want to turn to is that effective cities are platforms on which effective organizations can actually harness young people. So now I want to say a little bit about what I mean, not by an effective city, but an effective organization, because you're all in charge of them. The work I'm going to draw on here, just to show that it's academically respectable, is by Nobel Prize winner George Akerlof. Effective organizations have a miracle of productivity within the organization. I've talked about cities being miracles of productivity in space. Effective organizations have a miracle of productivity within the organization. How do they do that? Scale and specialization. We've known that since Adam Smith. Scale and specialization. But what Adam Smith didn't spot, and which we've only woken up to in recent years, is that scale and specialization bring a problem, a potential problem, of motivation. If you're working on a farm with only 2 workers, if you don't work hard, you starve. But if you're working in an organization with 500 workers, and you don't work hard, or you don't cooperate one specialism with another, maybe you can get away with that. And so big organizations, to be effective, have to motivate their staff. Now for years, basically, ever since I was in my 20s, economics thought it and understood the science of motivation, and it was basically incentives. You have a carrot on a stick in front of the donkey, right? And there's been a vast edifice of economics built around how you design a carrot, just how far in front of the donkey's nose should it be, right? What Akerlof has shown is that actually that is not a terribly effective way of getting performance, except in rare instances. It works where you can very precisely define what productivity is and very precisely monitor. So it works on the factory assembly line, just about. Very few work contexts are like that. And so what most effective firms actually use, alongside some incentives, is internalization of the objectives of the organization. They persuade the workforce and asked by international investors, what do I think it's going to look like? The example I draw on is India. And if you remember, about a year ago, India changed government. The Congress party, which was ruled in India for decades, was ousted, and a new leader, Modi, came. And Modi's commitment was basically to clean, efficient government. Right? He hadn't got a big economic agenda, but it was an agenda around we're going to have crackdown on corruption, and we're going to get a more serious system, really, a less rent-seeking, a less indulgent system of government. And I have to say, India has done it very well. It's now overtaken China in its growth rate for the first time for 20 years. So that's a sort of hopeful comparison, I think. What does that mean? It means building a decent system of financial management within government. The obvious thing, right? Just get the oil sector properly integrated into the budgeting system. It also means building taxation beyond oil. It's astounding that the government is only raising 3% of GDP in non-oil taxation, which must be the lowest in the world. I've never encountered anything as low as that. So it's extraordinary. And of course, Lagos has led the way. Lagos showed you could do it. And that produces a virtuous circle, because as people pay tax, they demand accountability. And modern analysis of the economic development process, here I'm thinking in particular of the work of Tim Besley at the London School of Economics. So modern analysis of the process of economic development, the path out of poverty, sees the most fundamental step as being where the government builds a tax system for taxing the economy. The reason is desperately crude. It's only once the government is taxing people's incomes that it's got a real burning interest in increasing those incomes, because it benefits them. It was just in the run-up to the last election. And what I started by saying is we need the voice of business in the political arena. It's really important that economic issues get expressed. Because a democracy depends upon a critical mass of informed citizens. And that doesn't happen automatically. The default option is a critical mass of ignorant citizens. And that is no help to anyone. And who is to build a critical mass of informed citizens? Who better than the business people whose work is to thrive in this economy? And they keep bumping their heads against the brick wall of poor policies. So it's a vital matter that you, as a group, speak up. This is why I'm so delighted to speak at a business day event, because the most articulate voice of the business community is, of course, the leading business paper. My final remark, building on from that, your voice needs to be heard, is believe in yourselves. Right? It's often hard to believe in yourselves when the environment you've been living in is a rent-seeking environment, which sort of undermines the belief in the ability to be productive. In a rent-seeking society, you're doomed to be uncompetitive. Relative prices are so misaligned that a productive firm can't make money. That's going to be over. Prices are in process of getting realized. Now the battle is a productivity battle. Believe in yourselves. Believe in your abilities to add value. I'm going to end with reference to one of my West African business friends. He's not from Nigeria, he's from Côte d'Ivoire. And he doesn't actually do business in Côte d'Ivoire. He moved to Britain, and he was just so much better than the British businessmen that he rose to the top of the biggest